Welcome to the first episode of My Best Story. Storytelling is an art form that has been around since the dawn of man. These days, it seems like we get most of our stories from books, TV, movies, or true crime podcasts, but we seldom get to hear stories from the people who actually live them. I believe that everyone has at least one great story that only they can tell. Maybe it's that story that you tell everyone the first time you meet them, or maybe it's a story you only tell your closest friends, or maybe it's a story you've never told anyone before. My Best Story is dedicated to discovering these stories and releasing them into the wild, one guest at a time. I'm Travis Tidmore. Join me as I discover Damian Holbrook's best story. Damian, what's your backstory?
Hey, so my backstory, I grew up outside of Philadelphia in a small town called Lansdowne, and that is like right adjacent to Upper Darby, which is a huge township. Grew up there, went to Catholic school. I was an altar boy. I went to an all-boys Catholic high school, which was a nightmare. Went to Temple University. Oh, it was a horror show. Went to Temple University. That was kind of awesome. Got a journalism degree from there. One of my classes was actually, this is so weird to think about this because this just shows how long TV has been part of my life. I grew up loving television, but my first journalism class at Temple University was a crime reporting class, and we would watch the first half of a Law and Order episode. And this was in the 90s. So you think Law and Order has been around that long that it was already being used in classes. That's pretty amazing. So hats off to Dick Wolf. So I got a degree in journalism from there, and then immediately discovered that TV Guide magazine was published in Radnor, PA, which was at the time 20 minutes from where I lived. It was literally in the backyard of Villanova University. So, yeah, and I just assumed it was, maybe a shipping or a billings department or something was there. And it turned out that they actually were building up an editorial department, and they were looking for writers. They had sent down a New York editor to open up this office and to start really building up editorial down here. So I applied. They hired me, and that was in 1995. Yeah, 1995. Wow. And I've been there since.
So 25 years?
25 That's years. Awesome. Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
On your anniversary.
Yes, it's this July, or this, I guess, September will be my 25th anniversary. Yeah, because I started, and it's weird, it was the issue that I started on. We were doing the fall preview issue, which is like the TV Guide magazine brand's iconic issue. It was Friends, ER, a couple other shows that were launching that year. So I got to my training was to read the scripts for these shows and then to boil them down into like little, 20-word descriptions. That's cool. Where it all started, yeah. And now, just today, I started working on a 911 cover story.
That's awesome. So where does your story fit into your backstory?
So that's the thing. When you were reading the intro or reciting the intro, I was thinking like, oh, do I stick with the one that I was going to do, or do I do something that's kind of cool, but I'm going to stick with the original because it does stick with my backstory. So I grew up loving television, and I grew up mostly in the late 70s, early 80s was like my really formative, like I was born in 69. So by the time I really got to an age where I got it and I could consume it, with any kind of like discerning eye, I was obsessed with Aaron Spelling shows. Charlie's Angels, Heart to Heart, TJ Hooker, The Rookies, Hotel, even like the failed ones that didn't last that long. I was obsessed with his shows. They were glamorous and everyone was beautiful, and Dynasty was just Love Boat, Fantasy Island. Like he was basically the architect of my childhood. So I was just fascinated by all of his stuff. And then he went through that phase where it was like ABC was called the Aaron's broadcast channel because he had all of his hits were on ABC. And that's what I consumed. And like I would do housework. I would do extra work around the house on Wednesdays, and especially in the fall, when back then season premieres were usually 2-hour events. And whenever Charlie's Angels had a season premiere, they were always 2 hours and they were 9 to 11. And when you're like in 4th grade, you're not staying up till 11. So I would do all this extra housework, convincing my parents to let me stay up. It was child labor as far as I'm concerned, but it worked. So this was where I was. Like I was just primed for this. And then when I was in college, 90210 began, the original Beverly Hills 90210. And I was working at a video store because that's what you do when you're obsessed with television and entertainment. And I remember it was a Sunday night and it was a 2-hour movie that Fox aired. And I was immediately obsessed with it. Like just fascinated because I was beyond the high school years personally, but it was that like fantasy version of a high school that I wish I had gone to. Because remember, all boys Catholic high school, not West Beverly. So I just became obsessed with this show. I would have been one of those horrible people in the fandoms that was like just really too much. And I worked in this video store, and then 2 doors down from the video store was, in Pennsylvania, we have a convenience store called Wawa.
Yeah.
And it's like a 7-Eleven or a Sheetz or a Piggly Wiggly or whatever. And every Tuesday was magazine day. And you'd get like the new Soap Opera Digest, you'd get new Entertainment Weekly, new TV Guide. And I, standing at the checkout, would see the TV Guide magazine, I'd page through it, and I would find what was happening on 90210. Because that back then, like they took out ads for every episode. It was always like, this week the kids go clubbing. Can they survive a night out with Emily? Things like that. So again, I was like, oh my God, this magazine knows everything. I was like, this magazine knows in advance, how like weeks in advance, what's going to happen on my favorite show. And then Melrose Place came along, graduated from high school or from college, and I get hired at TV Guide. By this time, though, because the reason I applied to TV Guide was they knew what was happening on 90210 and Melrose Place. Like, and not just that it was close or or an iconic brand or anything. It was like they knew this was the mothership. So when I got hired there, it was already just a dream come true. But there was already a writer handling both of those shows. And he was LA based, and there was no way I was just going to like walk in off the street and take away this guy's hit shows. So through the duration, I was really just the guy that the editors would check with and be like, is this really happening on this show? All the while, I'm still obsessed with the show. And I wrote both of those shows to the very end. So I guess it was like, I started there in 95, 98. I go to California for the very first time. 90210 is still happening, it's still on, and it's the Television Critics event, which is this annual, actually it's biannual, it's every July or August and every January. And it's when all the TV critics from around the country get together and the networks present their new shows, their programs, all this stuff. And it's been going on for about 30 years. So I go out there for the first time, and the first night I get there, that night is the Fox party. So Fox had presented all day, and then they hold an event for the journalists at night where they bring out all of their talent to do interviews and have dinner and blah, blah, blah. I had gotten in touch with the Fox publicist, and I was like, will Aaron Spelling be at the Fox parties tonight? And he was like, oh yes, he will. Would you like to meet him? And I was like, it's all I've ever wanted. So my editor at the time, he had flown out with me. And so we go to this party. It was called like the Beverly Hills Supper Club. It was on Wilshire in LA. And we're there and we're doing some interviews and you're mingling and blah, blah, blah. And I'd never met any of these other journalists before. I'd never been in like an event like this. The publicist comes up to me and he finds me and he's like, do you want to meet Aaron? I was like, oh my God. And he turns and there's Aaron Spelling. I had read his biography already. I had interviewed him on the phone several times. And I guess he had remembered that I was so effusive. And he was like, Damian, my friend, you have to join us. And he's with his wife, Candy, at the time. And I was like, what is this? And he like gestures to this huge table behind him. It's this giant banquette. And on one half of it is the cast of 90210. And the other half is the cast of Melrose Place.
That's
and he's
fantastic.
like, Jenny, get up, let him in. Jenny Garth gets up, slides me into this booth, and he sits down, then the rest of them come in, and he's introducing me to, it was mind-blowing. Like, it was, if I had died right there, my life had fully lived. Like, it was insane. So, like, Jenny Garth is sitting there next to me, Heather Locklear is across the table, Jamie Luner is at the next table because she had just joined Melrose Place. And Brian Austin Green showed up. He had just gotten a bespoke suit made for him for that night. I think it was their anniversary. It was like the anniversary of 90210. It may have been like I forget. There was some kind of event. Like it was a big deal for them. That's why they were all there. But it was the greatest night of my entire life up until that point, and probably still in the top 3. And we're sitting there, and I'm like pitching ideas to him. I'm like, you know what? You need a fat gay guy on Melrose Place. You need somebody to roll into that development and teach those people that there are carbs. And like Jenny Garth is laughing, and Heather's like, you're crazy. And it was beyond. And there was a guy that was on the show. He played Noah on 90210, and he was from Philadelphia. So he and I got to talking about being from Philadelphia and exchanging ideas about like different restaurants there. It was just one of the greatest nights. It was the first time I talked to Tori Spelling, and she was just so delightful and so sweet. And just, you know, they had all been going through all that stuff with like the gossip and the paparazzi and everything. Yeah. And every one of them proved to just be absolutely lovely. It was the greatest night.
That's awesome.
So that is enough is a great story for me. But they recently rebooted the show last summer. Yes. When that came up, there was nobody that was going to cover that show better than me. You know, I knew it inside and out. I've rewatched that show so many times. So they were like, well, obviously Damian's covering this. I got to fly out to the Vancouver set. Remember, I never got to cover the show originally. Yeah. But the reboot, I've been around long enough to get to cover the reboot of my favorite show ever. I flew out to Vancouver. They were shooting in Canada, which does not have a 4th of July. So I was on set for 4th of July. And I got to watch from their set, like their rebuilt set of the Peach Pit, Shannon Doherty, Brian Austin Green, Ian Ziering, Gabrielle Carteris, Tori Spelling, Jenny Garth, and Jason Priestley all filming like this walking scene together, and just got to watch them interact. I was in heaven. That was the only moment that surpassed the other moment, was getting to watch these characters and these actors interacting for the first time in almost 20 years. It was awesome. Just my favorite thing ever. And we did a cover. I have a group shot with the entire cast. So that was one of those things, like I am invited to speak to my old at Temple University, and that's something that I always talk about, is like, you just never know. You never know what you might get to do. Like, you think, like, jobs are hard. There's a lot of crap that we put up with, but every once in a while you get to have that like great moment of joy that, you know, no one can take away from you. And that's one of them. So that's my story.
That's really awesome. That's a great story.
Thank you.
So what are you up to these days? Obviously still working for TV Guide.
So still working for TV Guide, covering a ton of shows. It's really interesting because right now we're in that place where, you know, All Rise is going to do an episode that's shot all on Zoom and WebEx and FaceTime. We're covering all this. Like, everything's changing so fast. So we're constantly doing stuff for TVinsider.com, which is our digital platform. And in the magazine, you know, we're still heading into season finale time. So we're like, you know, like the 911 cover story that I'm doing is on their season finale. Sure, it may not have been the original season finale they had planned, but they're getting, like, I know, like, Riverdale is going to have an abbreviated season, but the great thing about Riverdale is every one of their episodes ends up with a cliffhanger.
True. So
it works as a season finale. Yeah. So just constantly trying to find new stuff to do, interviewing people in new, interesting ways, finding out what they're doing, how they're handling all of this. And eventually I'm going to read. eventually I'm going to pick up a book. I've had like a ton of them. And
Yeah.
and I feel like I hear their cries of loneliness when I'm watching 7 or 8 hours of Netflix. And so eventually I will pick up some book and read it. It'll probably be something that's been adapted for a TV show.
I have a stack of books right now that my phone is sitting on to record me that I am waiting. I'm reading a book and I'm about halfway through and I'm looking forward to finishing that one and deciding what's next.
See, if I can get halfway into a book, I'd be so excited because that means that I'm like powering through it. Like, what are you reading?
I am finishing up the His Dark Materials series right now.
Interesting. Okay. All right. What did you think of the adaptation?
I haven't watched it yet because I'd read the first book before the show started, but I had heard there were spoilers for book 2 within the first couple episodes, so I decided I was going to finish the series so I could watch the show.
Interesting. And I'm doing kind of the reverse. I had the Magicians, the 3 Magicians books set on beside my bed, and I wasn't going to read them until the series was over because I didn't want to kind of like cross-pollinate. And so now it's done, and I need to dig in.
I read the first book, and I hated it so much.
Wow, really?
And so I put off watching the show, and then finally last year I started watching the show. I watched the first, I think, 2.5 seasons, and then something happened, and I haven't got back to it, but I need to finish it because the show is phenomenal.
You have to catch up. They nailed the landing. They nailed the landing on that show. Perfect. They did such a great job. Yeah, I'm
looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So where can people find you online?
So you can find me online at tvinsider.com. You can find me on Twitter at Damian Holbrook. On Instagram, I think I'm also at Damian Holbrook on Instagram. I never checked what that is. And I'm trying to think what else. I'm sure I'm on LinkedIn. I found out that I had a Vero account a couple days ago. Remember Vero?
No.
I want to say it was kind of like it wanted to be a Twitter, and it was started by someone famous.
But it was just awful.
I forget. Yeah, like it never really took off, but it was started by someone famous, like kind of like as a reaction to Twitter or something. I don't know. So that's where you can find me. And you can find me here on this.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being a guest, and
Definitely.
I may have to have you back for your second best story so I can hear that other one you were thinking.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. That's a pretty cool one. But yeah, have me back. I'd love to be here. I'd love to visit.
I'd love to. Well, thanks again for being on the show.
Cool. Thank you.
Special thanks to Damian for being our first guest on My Best Story. New episodes will drop right here every Tuesday and Thursday. Be sure to check back this Thursday for author Brock Wilbur's story. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Our title music is Red, White, Black, and Blue by Peg and the Rejected. If you have a story you'd like to tell on the show, hit us up on our Facebook page, on Twitter at My Best Story Show, or via email at mybeststorypodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, go live your best story.